Hello and welcome to ThoughtCast, the SPJIMR podcast, a rendezvous between a corporate head and an academic, a conversation about business and leadership. Today we have with us Mr. Uday Kotak, MD and CEO of Kotak Mahindra Bank. Under Mr. Kotak's leadership over the last 3 decades, the Kotak Group has established a prominent presence in major areas of financial services in India, including banking, stockbroking, investment banking, car finance, life and general insurance, and asset management. He has won many awards and accolades, including being named as the best CEOs in the world. In conversation with him today is Dr. Tulsi Jayakumar, Professor of Economics and Chairperson of Family Managed Business Program at SPJIMR. She has in fact co-authored a book with Mr. R. Gopalakrishnan called How Uday Kotak Built a Valuable Indian Bank. The book has just been released. So here she is in conversation with him. Over to you, Tulsi.
Welcome to the ThoughtCast, Mr. Kotak. I'm going to start off with the set of questions which I'm sure all of us are dying to hear from you. I want to start with dwelling on the 3 M's as I see it, shaping your early childhood. Ma, math, and mania for cricket. Tell us a little about each of these 3 M's and how do you see them as playing a role in the building of Uday Kotak, the banker?
Thank you very much, Tulsi, and delighted to be doing this with you. And when I look at my childhood, obviously, mothers play a major role in the childhood period in particular, and more so in my case because, as you know, I was born in a family with more than 60 members under one roof, and the mother was the anchor of my childhood, especially in the early years. And when I grew up, I also was struggling in school in the early days because the school expected me to write with my right hand while I would do all the work at home with my left hand because I was a left-hander. And mother stepped in and informed the school that they were getting it wrong since I was a left-hander. And she made sure that all the work which was required of me was done with fun and joy. Amongst the early learnings I had was a great amount of support from mother and my natural affinity for arithmetic, numbers, and mathematics. And that's something which has held me in good stead ever since. And of course, the third one, which was a passion, was cricket. And I still remember I was prolific in gully cricket. And we used to play with the tennis ball and throw balling onto the stumps. And I would spend disproportionate amount of time out playing in my compound cricket, at times saying that I will do my work later. So the 3 M's, as you rightly said, Tulsi, have been very important part of my early life, which is the role of the mother, arithmetic, numbers and maths, and of course, my love for cricket.
So, a little bit on how cricket shaped, say, the banker in Uday Kotak, sir.
So cricket was something which was very close. I played in school, I played in college, I played Kanga League. I was very fortunate to have a coach called Ramakant Achrekar. And my claim to fame is much later, of course. Ramakant Achrekar was the famous coach of Sachin Tendulkar, but I got to know him quite well. And he really was an outstanding coach and truly passionate and committed to the cause of cricket. So I learned a lot. It gave me ability to have teamwork, just as my joint family gave me the concept of teamwork. And as I grew up playing cricket, I had an unfortunate incident, which is a ball hit me on my head while I was running between the wickets, as a result of which I had a head injury. And thereafter, my family said, enough is enough, no more cricket. And at the age of about 19 or 20, I had to stop playing cricket because of the head injury, which led to a surgery as well. But cricket was one of the very important parts of my early upbringing.
So, in fact, I was speaking to your father, sir, and your father said, we don't know what happened when that cricket ball hit him on his head. And probably it has to do with the sudden flourishing of Uday Kotak, the banker, but that was on a lighter note, of course. So, that was an amusing anecdote which your father had played out to me when I spoke to him. I go on to the next question. Even as a child, we know that you were highly competitive and hated to be number 2 in whatever you did. But if we look at the business world, we know that competition is the bedrock of the entire business world. And a new term being bandied around, which has become fashionable since the 1990s, when it was introduced by Harvard and Yale professors Bradenberger and Naliboff, is that of coopetition. So, what is your take on coopetition as a strategy? Even while we see more instances of winner takes all strategies being pursued, especially in the financial world.
Tulsi, in the post-pandemic world, it's also getting to be much more a K-shaped kind of a recovery. And I am actually of the belief that we have seen more and more cases of winner takes all. It comes with its risks, it comes with concentration, it comes with monopolies, but it gives very little room for failure. And therefore, one of the most important strategies as you think about the future is how can you really disrupt yourself and ensure that you will be at that cutting edge, probably the only person surviving. That's the kind of mindset you need to have, with a sense of paranoia that if all else around planet Earth fell, you still want to be that man or person standing. And I am of the view that the future is getting to be more winner takes all, and cooperation is good, but what is happening is blurring of lines between different sectors. Therefore, technology, finance in particular are blurring. And therefore, what you think is cooperation today will be somebody else eating your lunch tomorrow. So you have to be careful how you structure cooperation. It should be in a manner where your lunch is not at risk, but in fact, you have the ability of getting into other people's territories. And I am, therefore, clearly of the view that the way to think about the future is play your game as if there is room for only one. If there is room for more than one, you're lucky. But don't plan on that basis, because who knows the future? Whether it is two, three, four. But I clearly see a concentration and consolidation beyond the realms of what hum sab saath hai mindset has been of the past.
Very interesting. So you're saying that coopetition may not, and that might be one of the fallouts of the pandemic, that this whole thing of people working together across boundaries may not last, and you need to be focusing more on winner takes all strategies. That's very interesting, Mr. Kotak. I want to ask you about the name Mahindra in KMB, and why do you still hold on to the Mahindra name?
There are some things which happen in life as a matter of history. And it's important to keep in mind that history has a value and repeats itself. So Anand Mahindra, I got to know in the early 80s, I think 84 or so. And Anand's company became a customer of our business. Thereafter, when we were forming a separate company, Anand volunteered to take some equity stake in that company, and which we were delighted. And I recollect going to him and saying, requesting him for his name in the name of the company. And he very willingly did after internal approvals from his father and uncle, and which is why we named the company as Kotak Mahindra Finance. And he has been very gracious. There is no piece of paper between us in terms of name, and we have named the company Kotak Mahindra Finance, which later on became Kotak Mahindra Bank. And of course, the logo Mahindra and Mahindra has the logo Mahindra, and therefore we have the logo Kotak in our name. And since we have no piece of paper, we have the flexibility of looking at the name whenever we think it is right for Kotak Mahindra shareholders and stakeholders. But so far, the name has worked well, and it has added value to our brand and franchise. And I'm really proud and thankful to Anand Mahindra and family for having given their name at the very nascent and early stage of our career. And I think we do believe that there are some things which destiny has planned. And so far, that destiny has worked.
Right. So you started off as a non-bank finance corporation. And we know that the government is now mulling over allowing well-run NBFCs, including those held by corporates, to turn into banks. So can we expect to see the KMB story, the Kotak Mahindra Bank story being repeated all over again? And what would such NBFCs have to guard against? What would be the mantra for success that you would want to give to such new private sector banks?
Tulsi, the world has changed so fast that I genuinely believe banking will survive, banks may not. Therefore, we should look at the business of banking as a business of intermediation between savers and lenders, and savers and borrowers. And therefore, don't think about banking as something which is so sacrosanct that the word bank will continue to have its meaning and purpose for a long, long time. We need to transform, we need to change. There will be enough new players coming into the intermediation business. There will be pools of profits which today banks sit on, which will be disrupted. And I would welcome competition because that brings out the best in all of us. And therefore, I would strongly say, with a reasonable amount of comfort, that let there be more players who can come in. But banking and finance is a business of risk, and never underestimate the importance of risk management and customer sensitivity, which is core to banking and finance. And when I look at it from a Kotak point of view, we are still only barely 2% of the banking and finance market. We have a 98% opportunity ahead of us. Therefore, let more players come in and let us all work towards growing the cake and, of course, getting a larger share of the cake.
Right. So, what we would want you to share with us is one particularly challenging moment that you faced over this entire journey of yours, and one extremely satisfying moment.
So, Tulsi, one of the most challenging times in my career was when we had a tough set of negotiations with our joint venture partner, Goldman Sachs. As you know, Goldman is a global powerhouse and a financial services firm with a leading edge position in investment banking, securities, M&A, and the works. We were fortunate to have Goldman as a partner for a long time because Goldman normally did not get into joint ventures. And when we got into a joint venture with Goldman, it was its first joint venture anywhere in the world. So, such a highly credible partnership at a time when India was just opening up in its capital markets was something which we really prided about. But there came a time when both parties really wanted to own 51% of this joint venture business.
Mr. Kotak, just one moment, let me interrupt you there. If you could just share that anecdote of how you went to meet the partners of Goldman Sachs, and over dinner there was a certain offer they made to you, because that's a very interesting anecdote.
So, Tulsi, this is of course before the joint venture. I remember in the early 90s when we had just started doing business with Goldman on an agency basis. I was invited by one of the senior partners of Goldman Sachs, a gentleman called Mark Evans, to come down to Hong Kong and meet his partners from New York. The two partners were Hank Paulson and John Corzine, and we met over dinner. And I was passionate about India. Goldman had no presence in India and was wondering how to think about India for the future. This is early 90s, 93, 94. So at the end of the dinner, the senior partners from New York asked Mark whether Goldman Sachs could hire me to work with them for the India strategy. And Mark went back and told that Uday wants to build a business in India. He's very happy to partner with Goldman Sachs, but likes to have his own destiny going forward. And that was the basis on which we went into the joint venture. We were partners for more than 10 years. And at the end of 10-year period, we had to figure out a way forward. Goldman was a 25% partner in the joint venture. And between both of us, each of us wanted, post the 10-year period, to have a majority stake in the joint venture. And since neither of us could find the mathematics for how both of us could own majority, we decided to go our separate ways. And that was one of the most challenging times because Indian markets were getting much more global. And that's the time when we were parting with one of the most well-known global firms in securities and charting our own destiny as a domestic firm. And it was not an easy one. We were scared about losing our people, losing our market positioning, but fortunately things worked out for us.
And what would you rate as one of the most satisfying moments in your life?
I think one of the most satisfying moments in my professional life actually comes out of a pursuit of a target. And this goes back to 2007-8, just before the global financial crisis, I met the chairman and CEO of ING Netherlands. And ING had a stake in an Indian bank which was named ING Vysya with a 44% ownership. And at that meeting, my purpose was to see how we can merge ING Vysya into Kotak. And this is pre financial crisis. ING was in a very good position. And ING, from their side, was trying to figure out how they could acquire Kotak Mahindra Bank in India. So we had a great discussion. We were both clear that we wanted to go forward. But then the global financial crisis happened. It changed things structurally. And post 2008-9, ING had its own challenges in its home market. And for a few years, we both, while we were in touch as institutions, we never got down to doing it. So a thought which started in 2007 finally culminated in 2014 when we were able to come to an arrangement of a merger with ING Vysya Bank, whereby ING Vysya merged into Kotak Mahindra Bank and became Kotak Mahindra Bank effective April 1, 2015. And it brings to light that if you really have something in your mind, if you pursue it long enough and in a systematic manner with clarity of what you want to do, finally there's great satisfaction in that acquisition. And we are today a merged bank, and it was the largest private sector bank merger in India at that point of time and probably till date. And we are very satisfied with the merger as things stand today, 6 or 7 years later.
Right. So it's been less than 2 decades. Your entrepreneurial journey, because you yourself come from a family managed business background, your journey to set up one of India's most trusted and valuable banks dazzles. And the sheer audacity of turning an NBFC into one of the top banks astounds us. So, what would be your message to the entrepreneurial ecosystem and to the intrapreneurship from within family businesses?
First of all, I believe the key word for the future and for the present is professional entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurs may start as the creative people, but there is a crucial need to embed professionalism in what they do. And professionals who grow must keep in mind that there has to be an entrepreneurial approach to succeed. Therefore, I am a big believer for true sustainable success, it is professional entrepreneurship which works. The second important point is there are some things in life which you keep it simple. And particularly in our business, I had three human mantras which I kept always in my mind. Number one, simplicity. Therefore, do not go for complex products, go for simple products. Second is prudence. Don't excessively leverage or take risks which blow you. And third is humility. Bankers are not masters of the universe, they are in the business of serving customers. Therefore, keep three human qualities in mind: simplicity, prudence, humility at the core of what you do as you go forward in your career and journey.
So, Mr. Kotak, what is your view on the current banking crisis that India is facing? And what is it that you would want to say to the ordinary citizens who today are kind of really wondering? There is a lot of bewilderment around the banking sector. What is it that an ordinary layman citizen should do in terms of where to park his funds?
I think at the heart of banking is trust. And bankers must keep that as the paramount goal of what a bank is. People trust their money in a bank. One of the issues which has happened is bankers have forgotten the simple principle that in banking, effectively, it is a 10 is to 1 leverage business or even higher leverage. And therefore, your room for error, for making a mistake, is extremely low. And though it is other people's money, you need to take care of that money even more than you would take care of your own money. And therefore, the core to banking is, as I said, prudence and ensuring that the customer's money and trust is taken care of, even if it means that you are perceived to be less aggressive on risk and not pushing undue lending. Therefore, core to the future of banking is customer centricity, risk management, and cutting edge quality of service and technology for the future. And banks who can do that will sustain. A lot of banks will find the going challenging.
So, when you're looking at ordinary savers and investors, would you say that they should continue to trust banks and the banking system and put their money into banks? Or, as I keep on getting these questions from a lot of people who are not so finance savvy, the question asked is, should we just kind of keep the money with ourselves or put it into gold and so on? So, what would be your message to these people?
I think I must first compliment the Reserve Bank of India for having protected the banking system in India. Therefore, even as few banks have got into trouble in the last few years, the Reserve Bank of India has stepped in and protected these banks from significant trouble, including getting capital brought in or getting the bank sold to another set of investors or investor. Therefore, so far, I must compliment the Reserve Bank of India for protecting the banking system. Having said that, my advice to all savers is always do some checking, some diligence on where you're putting your money. Bank is, of course, safe because the RBI also protects it, but at the same time, do reasonable homework and diligence as you keep your money in a safe place.
Mr. Kotak, I'm just taking you away from the banking sector. I have been speaking to a lot of your team members. The one thing which emerges is how difficult a transition from a non bank finance company to a banking company would have been. The entire process of getting systems and processes into place was one big challenge. So, Mr. Kotak, tell us a little about the challenge of transforming from an NBFC into a banking company.
I think the most difficult part was that our entire liability side of the balance sheet was primarily wholesale. There was some fixed deposits, but bulk of it was wholesale liability. A bank is a retail bank. It's about customers walking into a bank branch across the length and breadth of the country. I still remember one of our advisors who was advising us on the brand and was working furiously for the few months before we launched the bank. He would tell his father, who was in Thane, saying that he's working for this new bank called Kotak Mahindra Bank, which is being set up. And then, of course, our launch happened. And we launched the bank with our first branch. And this gentleman went to tell his father that today the bank is launched. So this old gentleman from Thana said, yes, you launched the bank, but where is the bank? I don't see the bank. So the importance of the whole retail franchise, taking care of individual depositors, millions of them as they become customers of the bank, require a certain amount of military discipline and process orientation. And this cultural change and professional change for a bunch of people with me, all of us who are non-bankers, to move this transition, we actually had a couple of people we took on in our team who were traditional bankers. But we at the same time wanted to keep the freshness of non-bankers as we built the banking business, keeping our common sense with us at all points of time. And finally, the outcome we came out with seems to be reasonably fine. Of course, I think a lot has changed in banking since 2003. Technology is a big change. And I still remember a person from the technology industry, I think it was Nandan Nilekani, who said that Uday, every year you will find that you spent a lot of money on technology. But let me assure you, in banking, you will keep on spending more and more money on technology year after year, and it will never be enough. And how true that word was, that even today, nearly 20 years later, we are still increasing our IT spends and budgets much more than what we used to when we thought we started in 2003.
And especially with the kind of digital revolution that one is seeing, I think cybersecurity and spends on cybersecurity would take precedence.
Absolutely, Tulsi. And on that, people ask me what keeps me awake. What keeps me awake at night is a worry. Will I have a bank next day? Will my customers' money be in the bank?
Right. One more question I wanted to ask you. So we know the story, and the story is there in the new book that has come out, Rupa Publications, How Uday Kotak Built a Valuable Indian Bank, which has been co-authored by Mr. R. Gopalakrishnan and by me, where we do talk about how this young boy that you were at 23 started off on this dream and started building a bank. But the kind of team that you were able to build was a team which probably is the envy of many large banks even today. How did you go about attracting these people? People like, say, Shanti Kambaram and Gaurang and Shivaji Dham and so on. How did you go about attracting such talent? And what is the message that you would have for some of the family managed businesses when they are looking at hiring talent and attracting talent and retaining talent?
Tulsi, we were all middle class people wanting to do things in life, not chasing money, but chasing purpose. And we were all very like minded. We all worked together as a team. We worked on what was relatively modest compensations. It was not the compensation which drove us, it was the joy of going out and building something. And we were coming in a world where the younger generation in India was coming from a very insecure place. Most of the quality people would normally want to go overseas and find a career overseas. We were all middle class people whom destiny had got us together and who were out there to build something with a purpose and a passion. And there was no outcome orientation. It was all about a very enthralling and satisfying journey which we were on.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kotak, for this wonderful conversation that we have had.
You were listening to SPJIMR's ThoughtCast, produced by Vinita Dwivedi, edited by Aditya Shroff, supported by Parth, Fani, Rishabh, Amulya, and Kaushik.